Saltwater Orchard, a Haven Collection story by Evelyn Grace. Copyrighted 2022. Read by the author. He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Micah 6:8. Chapter 1. Ryan. Ryan Jordan knew she should have stayed in bed today. The clocks changed yesterday. She was now sleep-deprived and dreading the mud that always plagued Maine this time of year. But that was the least of her worries. She grabbed the coffee cup as it started sliding off the end of her tray, catching it before it slammed to the floor. Ryan saved the mug from breaking, but coffee dripped down the front of her shirt and apron, pooling on the floor at her feet. Just great. Her day began with her landlord banging on her door an hour before her alarm went off, and the day had continued going downhill from there. Colleen, one of the three sisters who owned the Three Cat Cafe, gently nudged Ryan toward the back. "It's just coffee. I have a spare shirt and apron out back. Why don't you go change? I'll clean this up." Ryan blew a puff of air out, fluffing her bangs up as she started towards the back office. "Lord, I could use a little help today," she whispered under her breath as she went to change. Her mind was going in too many directions. She was having a hard time focusing on what she needed to do right now, because she kept thinking about what she needed to do tonight. Move. She hadn't planned on moving, but ever since Stan, her landlord, had shown up this morning, she knew she needed to leave as soon as possible. She couldn't remember everything he'd said, and he'd left before she could do more than rub the sleep out of her eyes. The only reason Ryan could think of for his actions was the fact that she'd rebuffed his advances more than once. He seemed to think since she had a daughter and no ring on her finger, it meant she would sleep with anyone. Stan didn't realize her daughter once had a father, or that Ryan had been married. It wasn't something she talked much about with anyone, and it certainly wasn't a conversation she would have with someone like Stan. It probably didn't help that she'd also made more than one complaint to the town about how he ran the trailer park. Getting Stan to fix anything took multiple complaints and often threats. Rats had come around the piled-up garbage, which he never seemed to have time to clean up. That's when she'd had enough. She'd called the town to file a formal complaint. Stan had been furious about the fine he'd gotten. Stan had told her this morning she had 24 hours to get out, or else. She didn't know what he meant by "or else," but she wouldn't stick around to find out either. Ryan no longer had the energy to fight with Stan, and she wouldn't keep looking over her shoulder, watching for him to show up to harass her. She would pack what she could carry and leave the rest without looking back. Where she would go, she didn't know, but it had to be better than dealing with Stan. Walking into Colleen's office, she found the spare apron and shirt hanging on a peg just inside the door. Ryan exchanged her wet top for the dry one and tied the clean apron around her waist. She hurried to transfer her pens, receipts, and tips from the wet apron to the one she was now wearing. She bundled the wet clothing into a plastic bag to bring home. "Lord, I'm not sure what you want me to learn from all of this, but please give me clarity." The only thing that had ever helped her get through life had been her relationship with God. She continued to think of all the potential places to go tonight. Ryan had told no one at work about her need to move. She knew the sisters who owned the cafe would help her if she only asked. She'd seen Colleen, Abigail, and Brenda do it before, for others. There wasn't much that went on in this town that they didn't know about. Haven was one of those small towns where everyone knew everyone else. It was the reason Ryan had always planned to leave as soon as possible. She wanted to start a life where she wasn't defined by her parents or where she lived. Her goal had once included plans to attend Bowdoin College to study biology. It was one of the top science schools in Maine. She dreamed of going since she was 9 years old and had seen an ad for the college while her dad was watching a TV show. Ryan still remembered how her father had laughed when she said she was going to go there someday. "We can't pay for you to go to some fancy-pants college, kiddo. Better get that out of your head right now." Her father had been right. There was no way her parents could help with the tuition, especially not when the paper mill closed. Her father had drifted from one dead-end job to another after that. They'd barely had enough money to pay their bills, let alone contribute to college costs. Ryan had worked long and hard, saving every penny she made, working to get the best grades she could. When her acceptance letter had come in, she'd been so happy. She couldn't wait to work towards her goal, but life had other plans. If Ryan had made her dream come true, she would be a biologist now. She'd be working in a lab, helping to find cures to diseases. Diseases like the one her little girl was now facing. Shaking off the memories of a past she couldn't change, she turned to go check on her daughter. Erica was playing down the hall in Brenda's office. Their regular sitter had canceled at the last minute. Since her 7-year-old daughter couldn't stay by herself, she brought her to work with her. Ryan suspected the sitter had canceled because she still didn't feel comfortable watching Erica since her new diagnosis. Even after all these weeks, Ryan couldn't blame the woman. There was a lot to consider when caring for Erica these days. Ryan sighed. It was one more thing to deal with. While the sisters were great about allowing her to bring Erica to the cafe when she needed to, she knew it wasn't fair to any of them to have the little girl there all the time. She needed to find a new sitter. Ryan slowed as she approached the office door. Her daughter's voice floated out to her. "Now, this won't hurt a bit. We're just going to check your blood sugar. Here, give me your finger. Okay, 1, 2, 3, just a little pinch. There now, that wasn't so bad, was it?" Pushing the door open a crack, Ryan peeked inside to see Erica on the floor with her teddy bear and blood sugar testing supplies. Ryan covered her mouth, swallowing hard as she worked to hold back the tears. Even after a month, it was difficult to accept that Erica had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and would now need to check her blood sugar levels and receive multiple injections every day to survive. Why couldn't life be fair? At least Erica was getting the hang of testing her own blood sugars and helping with her shots. Ryan sometimes couldn't believe just how strong her little girl was in the face of all these changes. Ryan pushed the door the rest of the way open and stepped through. "Hey, sweetie, you okay?" "Hi, Mommy." It hadn't taken long for Erica to tell her mother how much she disliked being asked what her blood sugar was all the time. Ryan was still working on not hovering over her daughter constantly. She had also learned just how expensive this disease could be. So far, her insurance was still denying the request for a continuous glucose monitor and an insulin pump. The technology would have eliminated the need for multiple finger sticks or shots every day. It would have allowed Ryan to track Erica's blood sugars right on her phone. That peace of mind would have been wonderful to have. However, the insurance company wanted them to work with injections for a few more months before they would even consider paying for any of the equipment. "I'm just checking Mr. Bear's blood sugar. It's a little low. I think he needs a cookie." "He does he? Can I double check?" She took a seat on the floor beside her daughter and waited for permission. "Sure." Ryan picked up the testing kit. 30 days ago, she hadn't known what diabetes entailed. She hadn't known what a normal blood sugar was, or even how to test to see if it fell in the correct range. Now she thought she could do a finger stick with her eyes closed. After pretending to check the teddy bear's blood sugar, Ryan reached for her daughter's finger. "Your turn." Erica made a face, but let Ryan draw the bead of blood needed. They both watched the 5-second countdown. The number appeared. 65. "Well, it looks like Mr. Bear needs a cookie after all. Let's go see what Brenda has in the kitchen." "Yeah!" Erica jumped to her feet, eager not only for the sweet treat, but to see Brenda as well. Her daughter enjoyed spending time in the kitchen with Brenda, and she always made time for Erica also. Ryan took her daughter's hand and headed to the kitchen. She needed to get back to her tables, but this came first. Erica often dropped fast once her blood sugar started going low. "Well, look who it is, my favorite little 7-year-old. Brenda smiled as Erica and Ryan walked through the door. She ruled the kitchen at the Three Cats and was a whiz with all things sweet. "Looking for a snack?" Erica nodded her head. "Yes, please." "Well, I have some chocolate chip cookies hot out of the oven that are about as big as your head. How about one of those with a nice glass of milk?" Brenda looked at Ryan for confirmation. Everyone at the cafe had been wonderful in supporting Ryan and Erica through their new phase of life. "Half a cookie, and the milk would be more than enough," Ryan said. She would need to give Erica some insulin to cover the sugar in the snack. There was more sugar between the cookie and the milk than what was needed to bring her daughter's blood sugar back to a normal range. Otherwise, they would deal with a rebound high in a few hours. Erica's smile slid off her face, but quickly came back as Brenda broke a cookie in half, plated it, and poured a small glass of milk. Brenda hadn't been wrong about the size of the cookie. Even though it was only half, it almost filled the small plate. Table 3 is looking for you. Leave her here with me while you take care of that, and bring Table 5 their orders. Things are slowing down. Brenda reached out and patted Ryan's shoulder. I need to give her a shot. Mommy, you can give it to me in a couple of minutes. Ryan contemplated all the variables it took these days to balance her daughter's blood sugar, with Erica's need to live a normal life. Nodding to herself, she replied, All right, sweetie. I'll be right back, but count to 30, slowly, before you eat the cookie, okay? But you can start on the milk. Okay. The little girl beamed a smile at Ryan. Grabbing the glass, she took a long swallow of milk. She set it down and gave Ryan another smile, complete with a milk mustache. Even though Ryan chuckled as she went to grab the food, her heart was heavy. She couldn't forget how close she'd come to losing her daughter when she was diagnosed. Erica's blood sugar had been dangerously high, and she could have slipped into a coma if Ryan had waited a few more minutes. She gave herself a mental shake. No more what-ifs. God had protected her daughter that day, and she trusted he would continue to do so. Ryan mumbled another prayer under her breath as she headed out to the front to check on her customers. God, give us the strength we need to get through this. Protect my little girl. And please, give me wisdom about what to do next. Chapter 2. Richard. Richard Mosley tried not to drum his fingers on the table. He was having a hard time paying attention. The meeting contributed nothing to his goal of becoming the newest vice president of the bank, and that was where his sole focus was lately. Yet here he was anyway. He worked to get his attention back on the discussion. He couldn't keep his gaze from flickering towards the window. The spring breeze was blowing the pine trees, causing them to sway. He knew it would be colder on the ocean, but it was a perfect spring day, a day where he wanted to be on the water up around Haven, where he'd spent his childhood summers. Richard, what are your thoughts? His mind slammed back to the present as he worked to hide the fact his head had been out tacking sail rather than focused on the meeting. The last thing he needed was for the bank president to catch him daydreaming. Richard rewound the meeting discussion in his head and found the question that had been asked. I think we need more information. This seems like a high risk to the bank. Do the financials back up their ability to pay back the loan? That's in Table 3 on page 45. And just like that, the conversation shifted once more. Richard let out the breath he'd been holding as he waited to see if he'd be reprimanded for not paying attention. He made more of an effort to stay engaged as the meeting progressed. He didn't need Adam Washer to know he'd faltered there for a moment. Not only was Adam the bank president, but he was the father of Richard's girlfriend, Sloane. Okay, we're adjourned. We'll meet again on Friday to make a final decision. Thank you all. Adam rapped the table with his knuckles twice before standing like he always did at the end of a meeting. Richard rose and scurried back to his office before Adam could comment on his lack of engagement during the meeting. He sank behind his desk and opened his email. A smile crossed his face as he reread the one he'd received yesterday afternoon from the vice president of loans. He would meet with the man that afternoon. The promotion was almost his. Richard's career was headed the way he wanted, finally. Banking hadn't been his first choice. While he had majored in business, he hadn't planned to work at a bank. His goal had always been to start his own company, be his own boss. He had taken the bank job to gain work experience, nothing more. Except life hadn't worked that way. He'd graduated college with a mountain of student loan debt. Central Bank in Portland was the first to offer him a job out of college. He started as a teller, working his way up the corporate ladder, and he found he was good at it. He even enjoyed it. Richard had planned to work at the bank for a few years while paying off his student loans, except 1 year turned into 2, which turned into 5, and now here he was, 10 years later, working in the loan office, with a promotion just around the corner. He smiled once more at the thought of becoming a vice president in the loan division. He had been working hard to be noticed, and it was finally paying off. He felt a slight twinge at the thought of how far he was from the dream of owning his own business. Over the years, Richard had written up several business plans, that included everything from a juice bar to a full restaurant to a car rental scheme. All had been good ideas, but none had been the idea, the one that would make him get out of bed eager to go to work daily. Except if he'd followed any of those dreams, he would have never met Sloane Washer. He smiled as thoughts of his girlfriend filled his mind. 3 years ago, Richard had attended the office Christmas party, where he met Sloane for the first time. They'd been dating for 2 months before Richard had realized Sloane and Adam were related. It wasn't until he received an invitation to a family cookout. He was surprised to find Adam in the kitchen, wearing jeans and a t-shirt and standing barefoot. Richard had never seen Adam out of a suit before. However, Adam had welcomed him with a firm handshake and assured Richard that their personal relationship wouldn't affect his treatment of Richard at work. So far, Adam had kept his word, and he certainly hoped Adam would continue to mean it because Richard was planning to propose to Sloane tonight. Richard had picked out the perfect ring. He'd made the reservations months ago. The small, intimate Italian restaurant, Trattoria Ricci in Oldport, would be perfect. The buzzing of his office intercom interrupted his musings. He still had a smile on his face when he punched the button to talk to the receptionist. Yes? There's a courier here with a package. You need to come sign for it. That was odd. Andrea usually signed for all packages. You can't do it? Sorry, no. The courier insists he needs you to sign in person. He could hear the frustration in Andrea's voice. She didn't like being told no by anyone, even if it was just a courier. Fine, I'll be right there. Punching the off button, he stood and hurried to the front desk. A messenger was shifting from foot to foot, eager to be on his way. Are you Richard Mosley? I am. Sign here. The courier thrust a clipboard towards him, pointing to a line. Richard scribbled his signature and handed the clipboard back. Have a nice day. The messenger grabbed the clipboard and shoved a manila envelope at Richard before spinning on his heel and hurrying away. Richard walked back to his office as he examined the outside of the envelope. A label in the front had his name and work address on it. There was nothing else to give him a clue as to who had sent it. He dropped into his office chair. Opening the flap, he pulled out a sheaf of papers. Well, His voice trailed off as he took in the words at the top of the page. The last will and testament of Arnold Carruthers. His uncle had died. Well, technically, the man had been his great-uncle, his mother's uncle. Unexpected emotions filled him as Richard read. He hadn't gone to see Uncle Art much in the last few years, and he hadn't even spoken to him on the phone in at least 6 months. Richard swallowed hard as he continued to read. A light tap on his door made him look up. Everything okay? Andrea entered Richard's office, a folder in her hand. Yeah. He cleared his throat and continued. My great-uncle died. They sent me a copy of his will. You didn't know he died? Andrea's eyebrows rose. I'm sorry. Well, Richard rubbed the back of his neck with one hand. I haven't been great about staying in touch. Still, I'm not sure why no one called me. Richard cleared his throat again, shoving emotions down. He wasn't about to let anything but his professionalism show at the office. Did you need me for something? He looked up and saw sympathy on Andrea's face. He regretted not talking to his uncle more, but he was busy building a life here in Portland. Uncle Art would have understood that. He must have left you something. Andrea walked over to drop the file on his desk. Adam wants that by 2 o'clock today. Adam left me something? Richard was confused. What would Adam have left him? No, silly. Your uncle. That's the only reason they would have sent you a copy of the will. She turned to leave. Let me know what you got. She smiled over her shoulder as she walked out the door. Maybe he left you buried treasure. She laughed as she continued down the hall. Richard smiled as his eyes went back to the page. He skimmed through the legalese at the top. Then he stopped, mouth dropping open, as he realized Andrea was right. His uncle had left him something. I, Arnold Carruthers, a resident of Haven, Maine, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament. I leave my entire estate, comprising my home, barn, and apple orchard, and all their contents in Haven, Maine, to my great-nephew, Richard Mosley, to do with as he wishes once he meets the following stipulation. He must live on the property and work the land for 1 year and a day. After that stated time frame, he may sell it if that is his desire. Richard must take possession of the property within 2 weeks of receiving notification. If he refuses this bequest or does not take possession within the stipulated time frame, he will forfeit the house and land to the Haven Fire Department for whatever purposes they wish to use it for. Richard stared in disbelief. His uncle had left him the apple farm? He hadn't seen that coming. What was he going to do with the farm? He continued to read the rest of the will, but the important part was right there at the top. If he were to inherit his uncle's property, he would have to make a drastic life change. Richard was on the brink of receiving the promotion he'd been working towards for the last year. Now he wasn't sure what to do. Accepting this offer would change everything. He wasn't sure he wanted to become an apple farmer. But now that the offer was in front of him, he wasn't sure he wanted to spend the rest of his life being a banker either. And what about tonight? Richard couldn't see Sloane moving to Haven and working on a farm. He wasn't sure she even owned a pair of sneakers, let alone work boots. There was no way she'd get her hands dirty and work with him. He tried to picture her digging in the dirt or picking apples and barked a laugh at just the thought of it. He sat back in his chair as his mind clouded with indecision. This could derail all his plans. The move would change everything. Yet he'd always loved the farm. He spent nearly every summer at Saltwater Orchard from the time he was around 8 years old until he was 16. The summers working beside his uncle in the orchard had been some of his favorites. Taking care of the trees so they would produce fruit in the fall was satisfying work. He remembered with nostalgia how it felt to put in a day of hard work and sleep well knowing he'd done a good job that day. Andrea poked her head in the door. "So what did he leave you? Anything good?" Richard pulled his attention off the papers and up to the receptionist. "He left me his entire estate, a house, barn, and apple orchard in Haven." "Whoa! Isn't Haven up on the coast somewhere?" "Yeah, it's a little town near Camden and Rockport." "What are you going to do with it?" "I'm not sure. Guess I'll need to figure it out." Richard stared back down at the will. He analyzed the risk involved. This could be the start of something amazing, or it could crash his career. Either way, he had very little time to decide.